So the next expansion for Diablo 4, Lord of Hatred, is bringing with it a ton of new interesting systems, some of which we have a bunch of information on, and some of which we don't know much about. And I wanted to go over one of those systems that we just don't have a bunch of information on yet, called Talismans. And this is the introduction of set bonuses into Diablo 4, but it seems they're doing it in a much more interesting way that is not going to be directly on gear, but we still don't have a lot of information on how this system is going to work when it comes down to a lot of the specifics. And this may be the part of the expansion that we have the least information on, because if you go to any articles, if you go to the official Diablo 4 website, every description of talismans is the exact same thing. Equip set bonuses with the new talisman. That's literally all of the information I could find in any of the various articles or any official information on the system. We do have some things to talk about because they did show off this system a little bit in the gameplay trailer we got, showing a little bit of how the UI is going to look, and also showing a druid with some things that we can't currently do on the druid from using this talisman system. Now let's take a look at the physical talisman itself from the gameplay trailer. So we see here that there is just a different UI. Presumably this will be in some menu or maybe even in your gear inventory. And we can see that there are 6 outside sections, and these are some new item, possibly just like charms or something that you'll probably be grinding for in game, and you'll be able to put all of these different items in these 6 slots. And depending on what items you put in these 6 slots, they will all combine into this middle section, which is probably the set bonuses and whatever new effects or possibly stats you will be getting. Now, a few really interesting things with this is, first off, in the gameplay, they have 5 sections filled, and they're still all channeling into the middle, giving you some effect or some bonus. So based off of that, we're not actually sure how many of these items you're going to need for these different effects to actually work. Like, we don't know if maybe there will be different sets you can all get at once. We don't know if you will need a certain amount for a specific set to get any benefit. We don't know if, let's say you put in one of these, will it give you some benefit for just having one, and then it grows as you put more in. And we really just don't have any information on how these different items are going to actually mix together to give you different effects. We don't actually know any of these effects, obviously, and we also don't even know if this system is going to just be stats or if it's all just going to be new, bigger effects like you could normally expect from a set bonus. Now, based upon some of the stuff we're going to go over in this video, I actually have the theory that you aren't really going to be getting pure stat increases from this system, or at least that's not going to be the main focus. I think the main focus of the talisman is actually just going to be new gameplay altering effects, and it's going to be less focused on like pure power increases or stat increases. Now, another interesting part of the talisman itself and these items they're putting in is that we can clearly see that these specific ones are for the druid. You have all of these different like rune symbols on them, and then on the sides of these there are 2 druid class symbols, so basically being like the big druid paw. I think this indicates is there are probably going to be generic non-class specific of these items that are probably going to tie into the sets, so there will probably be sets or set bonuses or different effects and things that aren't class specific, that are generic, that can be used by all classes. And maybe those will be things that are a bit more stat oriented, but they could also still just be different gameplay altering things that aren't specifically about just giving you stat increases. Now, these druid paw symbols at the side could potentially just be like a visual thing to show you, but in my opinion, I don't think they would actually add those and show you that these are druid specific if there weren't also ones that are generic, because we already don't really get gear drops or drops for other classes specifically, so it wouldn't really make sense to have to visualize that with how Diablo 4 is. So I think it's a very high chance that there are also going to be these items that are probably going to be like charms that are also generic, that all classes can use and give more generic set bonuses. And something else that could potentially be really interesting that we can glean from the Talisman UI is that the center thing that all of the outer things are feeding into seems to be some combination of the different rune symbols on the outside. So the middle one, it seems to have some element combining all of the outer pieces. So this may be indicating that there is a lot more variations and combinations based upon the different outer, let's just call them charms, that you're adding into the system, because it could go the kind of most basic route of set bonuses, which is just you have this set, it's named this, you need this many pieces to activate this set bonus, and that's pretty much all you get. And maybe you can mix and match, like maybe one set's a 2 set, one set's a 3 set, and you can mix and match that. But based just upon the visuals of this, it may actually be much more free to allow you to mix and match all of these different effects or set bonuses. Now that's just a theory based upon the visuals here, but I do also think that's a decent possibility, especially since they're adding this new talisman system to give us set bonuses instead of just having them be on gear like you see in pretty much all of the other ARPGs. So I think a big reason for that is probably they want a lot more mix and matching in the system than you can normally get with set bonuses on gear. Now, before we get into some of the gameplay that we got to see of a druid after supposedly putting in all this different talisman pieces, is that the talisman is actually something that was being worked on in the Diablo franchise all the way back in Diablo 3. But I did want to go through, I think, the entire progression of the idea of this system that has led to this talisman. So I think this first starts in Diablo 2 with the charm system. Obviously in Diablo 2, you have all the different charms you can get or craft, and you put them into your inventory, and they give you a stat increase, and that's basically all they do. You take up inventory slots for more stats, and that is a really old, more classic system that really wouldn't be too favorable in new ARPGs. But we do have other games that have taken a similar system to this and just put it in its own UI. You have things like the idol system from Last Epoch, where the idol system is essentially charms with a little bit more possibilities just put in its own UI. So instead of being in your inventory, you have these charm slots you unlock more and more of as you go throughout the campaign, and you put all of these different sized idols within them that have different stats on them. The different types of similar sizes can have different stats. A lot of them do have multiple stats, so they're a bit more interesting, and I think they have added more unique effects to that system as they've developed Last Epoch. But at a base, the Last Epoch idol system is essentially charms from Diablo 2 just in its own UI. And then if we go take a look at the talisman system that was supposed to be in Diablo 3, we get a look at something that may be somewhat similar to like a precursor to the talisman system we're getting in Diablo 4. So originally in Diablo 3 in development, they made a talisman system that, just like the talisman system in Diablo 4, would have its own UI on your character panel where you would get all of these different items. I think they were actually just calling them charms. You would farm these items, you'd put them in there, and they would give you the different effects. And we never got to see this, but there was some information from developers that originally the talisman system was supposed to be like this mini game that had more interesting effects and things in it. But for Diablo 3, they want all the systems to be much more simplified. So they kept simplifying that talisman system down to basically just be a different UI where you put charms into, they gave you stat increases. And they eventually figured that why have this other system that's just stat increases when you could just get the stats on gear? So they ended up not using that talisman system for Diablo 3. It seems they're kind of taking that idea for Diablo 4, but kind of doing something completely different with it, because there was never any talk of like set bonuses or anything like that in Diablo 3. It was all generally just going to be stat increases. And I think that's what they're specifically not trying to do with talismans here. Having this be set bonus focused, I think is them trying to basically not have stats be a part of this system, because just adding a ton more stats through another progression system would just further inflate the power and power scaling we have in Diablo 4 right now. I think the talisman system coming with this expansion is going to almost be completely focused on just new effects and allowing the different classes to do things they weren't ever able to do before. Now, as I mentioned, the talisman they gave us a look at in this gameplay trailer actually showed that all of the things on the outside, which are probably just going to be charms, did all have the druid class icon on them. And then right after they showed that, they showed a little bit of footage of a druid, and this druid was using a few things that we either don't have in the game right now or can't be done currently in Diablo 4. So first off, this druid is using the Grizzly Rage ultimate. This is the form they go into, and there are a few things that can't be used in the werebear version of Grizzly Rage. Those are primarily pretty much any lightning skill. Now you can use one of the legendary aspects that makes Grizzly Rage turn into a werewolf instead, and then with some other things you can use lightning skills through that, but this is the werebear version of Grizzly Rage. And as we're going into this, you also see lightning strikes. Now there are a bunch of ways to get these different lightning strikes through some of your passives, so that is actually normal, but I think one of the reasons they're having lightning strikes being shown in this piece of gameplay is specifically trying to show different combinations you can do, and I think they're trying to show that there will be a possibility for, say, through the set bonus to have a Grizzly Rage build focus on lightning damage, because after this druid goes into Grizzly Rage, they also start using Storm Strike, which is one of the lightning basic skills that kind of jumps around to different enemies, and you can't normally use Storm Strike in the werebear version of Grizzly Rage. You just can't normally do it, and they are using it here, so that's one thing you can't normally do. I also can't tell if these like red projectiles going around are from this druid itself or just from the enemies, but then this druid also uses what seems to be some new combinations, because this druid uses the trample ability. Now he does create a bunch of like rock animations behind him when using trample, and we do have that right now with landslides, where you can get a legendary aspect where when you trample, it just spawns these waves of landslides. This is actually a different animation. These aren't the normal landslide earth pillars that spawn. These are a completely different animation, so it seems those are something different. But then at the end of this druid's trample, they create this big circular earth explosion that knocks everything back, and this also doesn't seem to be something we currently have in the game. We do have something that's kind of similar, where when we cast one of our skills, specifically one of our companion skills, it does a bunch of landslide circles around us, but again, this is a different animation compared to what we have in game, so this is showing a few different new things that we currently don't have. But I do think one of the biggest things that we're showing in this is a werebear Grizzly Rage druid, specifically using lightning skills, and then also having new effects on their trample. So it's a bunch of new things, a bunch of new combinations, and I think they're kind of trying to show that there are going to be some crazy new combinations and effects that you can't do in game right now, that specifically talismans are going to allow you to do. And that's even before getting in the skill tree overhaul that's going to allow you to have a bunch of different variants on all of the skills. Combining all of that is going to be crazy, but I think the talisman is going to be a pretty big piece of that, for specifically allowing a bunch of new crazy combinations. And I think one of the biggest pieces of this system that I haven't heard many people talk about is that these things that I'm just calling charms that you are putting into the talisman that make your set bonuses and all funnel into the middle are probably all going to be items that we have to farm in game. That would be something that is kind of obvious, but I don't think they're going to be something like glyphs that we have in the Paragon boards right now, because once you get up to max level in Diablo 4 right now, you very quickly get pretty much all of your glyphs for your Paragon boards, and those really aren't seen by pretty much anybody to be items in game that you go farm and you can get a cool drop of a glyph or something. They basically just give you to them almost instantly for doing anything, and none of them are interesting as an actual drop. These are probably going to be things that are somewhat rare and very interesting. There is also a good possibility that these different things that we can just call charms that you're using with the talisman are going to have different rarities. I think that is actually a decent possibility. If that's the case, that actually opens up so many more possibilities with just adding more and more of these. Because if you take that possibility of these, say, charm items that you're putting into the talisman, having different rarities and having different sets based on those rarities, well, you could have rare sets that are somewhat easy to go farm, that give you lesser effects that aren't as crazy, but then you can get up to legendary versions of these items. You could get up to unique versions of these items, which could get really crazy. There could even be the possibility that they have like mythic versions of these items used in the talisman that just give you some absolutely crazy possibilities. And that in itself, not even counting the really cool effects you're getting from this, just adds so much to the game. Just having these new items that will be another chase item to try buy and go get could just potentially be incredibly cool. But that's pretty much all the information I could glean for the new talisman system coming with the next Diablo 4 expansion. Obviously, a lot of the stuff I went over in this video is just theories or trying to go off of the small bits of information we have, but this is legitimately one of the most exciting systems coming with the expansion, and I don't think I've seen a lot of people actually talking about the system and what it could actually be bringing to the game, and I'm very much excited for it. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.